Welcome to our Emmaus devotional for July. We took a month off last month for Father's Day, so it's good to see you all again. We will start with an opening prayer, and I didn't ask anyone, so if we have a volunteer, raise your hand, otherwise I can say it.
I'll say it.
Thank you, Doug.
Our dear Father in heaven, we're grateful for this time that we have to meet together. We're grateful for the blessing of having friends that feel like family to join together. And we are grateful that we'll have the opportunity to listen to Allison this evening to hear some of her thoughts. We thank thee, Father, for the love that thou hast given us. And we're grateful for the love that we feel through one another. And we pray that we may be able to take of that love and spirit and to help to light the world around us, to touch the hearts of people that are close to us, our neighbors. And we say these things in gratitude in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Doug. We're going to start out with a musical number. Valerie, if you want to go ahead and play the musical number.
Abide with me, fast falls the eventide. The darkness deepens, Lord, with me abide. When other helpers fail and comforts flee, help of the helpless, oh, abide with me. Swift to its close, ebbs at last little day. Earth's joys grow dim, its glories pass away. Change and decay in all around I see. O thou who changest not, abide with me. I need thy presence, every passing hour. What but thy grace can foil the tempter's power? Who like thyself my guide and stay can be? Through cloud and sunshine, Lord, abide with me.
Thank you, Andrea and Andrea's friend. I always appreciate those who are willing to share their musical talents with us. I think it's such a great way to invite the Spirit in. So thank you. I don't know if anyone's new here, but we at Emmaus, we try to go off of 2 operating principles, and we kind of base everything off of those principles. So I'm going to read them to you. And the first principle is, it is crucial for the well-being of LGBTQ individuals to be able to live in a space where their faith, spirituality, religion can coexist with their identity as LGBTQ. Forcing a choice between one or the other creates trauma and unhealthy emotional, relational, and spiritual patterns. Then principle 2 is, there is value in encouraging spiritual practice and connection or inclusion in a spiritual community, even when individuals are not perfectly conforming with church norms. Thank you. We really try to remember those principles and honor the agency and personal inspiration that everyone receives for themselves. And I really like that about Emmaus. We are delighted to have Allison Davton speak to us tonight. And I just want to tell everyone a little bit about her, in case you don't know who she is. And Allison, I stole some of this off of your Lift and Love website. So Allison Davton lives in Salt Lake with her husband, Kenn. They have 3 adult children and their family is expanding. Allison grew up in an Ids LGBTQ family, as her oldest brother, Preston, is gay. Back in the 70s and 80s, her parents tried their best to be an openly LGBTQ family in the church, but neither they nor Preston felt supported. Unfortunately, in 2017, Preston died by suicide. At this time, Allison's son was starting his own process of coming out. Preston's painful life was a gift to Allison. Through the good and the bad, the sad and the joyful, she learned what she needed to know to raise a healthy gay son. Because of this journey and the blessings Allison has experienced having an LGBTQ child, she dedicates her time and talents helping other LGBTQ families, wards, and leaders support these most precious children of our Heavenly Parents. Allison is the founder of Lift and Love and an organizer of the Gather Conference, which is hosting its first annual event this September in Utah. Allison, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for everything you do for this community. We love you and we're excited to hear from you. So we turn the time over to you.
Oh, thank you so much. And I'm so excited to be here. I love Emmaus. I love all that you do and the space that you carve out. It's such an important space. Just the work that you do with leaders and of course, the time that bringing everybody together. It's a lot of work. So thank you. Okay, I'm going to do my best here to, let's see, can I share my screen? I think I can. Here we go. I was just trying to drop a song in, but I'm going to not do that. If I try to be too tricky right in the middle, I'm sure I'll blow everything. So let's see. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Everyone, okay, good.
Yep, good.
Okay, so this is the title I picked. I was kind of excited to speak, even though it's a holiday weekend. We don't have any really big plans, so no big deal to me. I'm here hanging out with my husband and my son, and but I love Pioneer. I love the Pioneer stories, and I was excited to kind of get into this. But let me just tell you, I know like the quick and dirty truth for those of you guys who don't know what Lift and Love is or who I am. So this is my little family. My gay son is in the middle. And of course, we take all of our pictures with the gay son in the middle and everybody touching him. I mean, every single picture. No, not really. This one was one that was supposed to, I was writing something for the church that ended up not getting published, but it was, you know, supposed to be this like, love on our child. Everybody thinks I started Lift and Love for my son, and I didn't. I always tell people Jake's great. Jake's doing really well. He just graduated from BYU, which was hard for him to get through, not going to school, but just the tension was really hard for him. But he had great friends and just really supportive people. And now he's going to San Francisco to do a master's degree in writing. So I'm sure that someday Jake will have a great story to tell and write. I actually started Lift and Love for my brother, who you heard about. So I'm 9 years older than Preston. There's 5 of us. He's the oldest. I'm the 4th. And we were really close. we were super close. He was born in 1960, actually. And if he was here, he would tell you that he came out to my parents. He was kind of forced out by his bishop to my parents at 13 in 1973. And in his early 20s, after trying all the countermeasures to not be gay, the mission, the dating girls in high school, all of the things, he finally came out to the world. He left the church and he left Utah for good. And I think I tell people this, I don't quite know how to say it right, but I think leaving the church, although he did it kind of in a purposeful effort to sort of break the tension, it actually broke his heart. And he spent the rest of his life trying to find something to fill the hole that the church and the gospel and his understanding of his heavenly parents filled in his life. And he was a devout believer, which has always been sort of my impetus, is that we cannot separate. We can't force someone to separate those two parts of themselves, that LGBTQ part or that child of God. And it's all, if somebody wants to leave it, I'm supportive. We're supportive. Lift and Love is supportive of helping somebody leave, but never forcefully. And I just saw the damage. So when I was 14, I was sitting on the bed talking to my mom, and my brother came up. And the Spirit said to me clearly, I was talking about what to get him for his birthday and a card. And the Spirit said to me clearly, Preston is gay. So this is 1983. And nobody talked about their siblings being gay, their friends being gay, or anything. We used the word a ton, but totally inappropriately. So this was like, I mean, in fact, as I was writing this morning, I can still feel it, that moment, when the Spirit said to me, Preston is gay. Not any other words, not any euphemisms or anything. It was, he's gay. And that really changed everything for my family. Of course, my little sister didn't know. Deb Grizel's on here, and she works with my little sister, Pam. I told Pam because I couldn't keep the secret. So one day we were driving somewhere and I told her we were going to visit my brother. My family was always, having a gay brother was always part of my family from then on. My high school friends knew. And after I graduated from high school, believe it or not, my parents sent me to live with Preston and his boyfriend, Peter, in Washington, D.C. in 1987. I was getting in trouble, and Preston talked him into sending me out there. And I lived with those two for 3 months and learned really how normal a gay relationship was, as I inserted myself right in between them and spent my time with them and their friends. You can see that my parents were pioneering to send their young daughter, who was already getting in trouble, to a big city with her brother who was not within the church and was gay. My parents really did try to be pioneering, and to be, they loved Preston and supported him. But I don't want to give the impression that everything was perfect, because this is a true pioneer story. My parents were doing the best they can. And just like our pioneer ancestors, my immediate family story is full of catastrophic mistakes, the struggle to exist, trailblazing, unbelievable faith, and triumphal moments, and of course, his tragic death. So 6 years ago, this June, well, it was May, my brother ended his life. He was 58. He was alone, and he was angry, and he was estranged from all of us, except my mom, but including me. A year before he died, he made me decide. He made me choose between the church and him. And I had this son that I knew was gay and hadn't told Preston about. So kind of angry and adversarial. And I just felt like I couldn't make the decision. And I felt like it was so unfair of him to ask me to do that. 6 years later and a lot of experience, I have really different feelings about that. now, and I understand better the pain that he suffered and why he would ask me to do something like that. And like all of us who have lost someone to suicide, I am left in an endless loop of whys and what if. And that is a hard place. And that drives me. And I think it's funny, I think he drives me. We like to say the phrase in the church, on both sides of the veil. Well, I can tell you, Preston and I work together on both sides of the veil on Lift in Love. And he is often nagging me in the middle of the night to understand something or to work harder, which is really irritating, or just to put an idea in my head. And who else would do that but him? So I've told my brother's stories many times, and in many places, if you want more, you can look at Lift in Love. But living alongside of his pain and marginalization was really foundational for me. In fact, I think that witnessing the pain should be a prerequisite for every member of the church. Witnessing the pain and the disconnection of our LGBTQ individuals. In fact, I think that everybody who implies that it's a choice should have to maybe live in a family of an LGBTQ person and watch a child struggle against themselves to come out, like I had to watch for years fight who he was. So that brings me to kind of the lesson that I've learned over the 6 years of Lift in Love. And it's funny how sometimes things are so clear, but it takes a while. So watching Preston, knowing Preston's past, I realized that in the past, we marginalized that individual. This is your problem, you need to fix this, and we sent them from the community. So, and I don't know when it started, but I think there's many influences. I think now that children come out early, parents are very protective. In fact, just recently I started thinking, my brother came out at 13 to my parents, which was not normal, and is more like typical now, but wasn't. But that makes a mom really protective. If you're 13 and you're struggling against who you are or what the church says you are, or really like the political landscape now, moms become super protective. And I'd like to say that dads do, and some do, but it's the moms, which is what Lift in Love it started as like this inspirational thing. And I knew immediately that it was the moms that needed the work and the help. So that's where the resources we sort of started with, was helping these moms protect their children. And then once they got that sort of settled, then it was the tension between the church and their family. And I tell people the change, and I know that not everybody is supported by family yet, but the change is happening, and it won't stop, because once you know the truth of this, you can't go back. I mean, this isn't an inevitability that our families will rally around our LGBTQ people as the parents support and as we have more open people. So I tell people all the time, things will change because the family is now embracive of the child. It's not just this grown guy who's come home from his mission and gone off, the deep end and look at all these horrible things he's doing. It's this child who's oftentimes one of the best children. The parents will say, this was my most devoted child. This was my, I can't tell you how many times I've heard he was the seminary president, or she was on seminary council, and like over and over again. These are just great kids. And some of these kids are still really struggling. So I tell people, like, change is happening, and it's happening because the families are starting to wake up and embrace their children for who they are. So let me see, I wish I had Okay, oh, more family pictures. There you go. So let's talk about, you can see our awesome 70s looks, which my brother's the tall one in the first, but then he kind of shrinks, I think. But anyway, this was on the right is my family, not too long before we lost my brother. A couple of years, but okay, so let's talk about pioneers. So pioneers, if you look it up, it's coming before all others in time or order, to establish, to open, or prepare for others to follow. So I put some words there, you can look at them: develop, spearhead, launch, instigate, trailblazers, OG, like if you want to be super hip and now. These are the words that you come up with when you do a search of pioneers, and they're applicable, but they really aren't what we talk about when we talk about Mormon pioneers. When I look at the Mormon pioneer stories, they're full of words like faith, sacrifice, courage, devotion, community, perseverance, and one that I just thought of as we were starting was conviction. So I wish I had conviction there. That's what we're talking about with pioneer. Yes, they were the first to settle. Yes, they were some of the first to come across in wagons. But these things are the things I want to talk about tonight. Okay, so my family, I love pioneer stories, and luckily, every single one of my ancestors came across the plains in the pioneer migration, every single one of them. And not only that, but every single one of them were in a polygamous marriage, which gives me ample time to really ponder that principle that I still struggle with. And I have to keep reading the stories and learning more about it. So like deeply entrenched in the pioneer stories, my family is. I'm going to read this for you. This is from Elder Uchtdorf, and it's kind of beautiful. For those of you who don't have like the family, the pioneer family like I do. Sacrifice, sorrows, and tears and the courage of faith. Let's see, I can't see the whole thing. And the courage, faith, and trust in the Lord characterize the early pioneers. I have no ancestors among the 19th century pioneers. However, since the first days of my church membership, I have felt a close kinship to these early pioneers who crossed the plains. They are my spiritual ancestry, as they are for each and every member of the church. So that is what I want to talk about. And I want you to know that I mean spiritual ancestors. I mean these pioneer words. I mean them in a new way, and not in a way that limits you. And I want you to think about that over sacrifice. I don't want us thinking about what we have to give up, or that we have to give up certain things to be members of the church and to be beloved of God. Spiritual ancestry, whatever that means to you, however you practice your spirituality. I want you to think in those more broad terms. Okay, let's see, how do I move? Okay, my first ancestor we're going to talk about here. So oddly enough, my brother Preston, not oddly, he was really big into pioneer ancestry, and he did a lot of our family ancestry. So, okay, this is our first family, and hopefully some of you will know the story of John Roe Moyle. So he was my mother's great grandfather, my third great, and his wife Philippa. It says in the history that they were handsome couple. I mean, Philippa, they both look like they've, those pioneer, none of them were smiling, and they've all had a lot of hard years. But they, as you might know, John Roe Moyle they both came from England. He was a stone cutter, and he actually, I think, made wine barrels in England. He migrated from England. They were some of the first converts over. They were handcart pioneers. He was a stone cutter on the temple. His son was the foreman for the building of the temple. He lost his leg when he was kicked by a cow at his farm in Alpine. And he carved himself this hinged foot and ankle that allowed him to walk. And then he walked back and forth, the story is, Although I did find in my searching today, there is some question to whether he did that or didn't do that. But for our purposes, he walked back and forth from the temple. He walked to the temple from Alpine on Monday and walked home on Friday. So hardcore devotion, not only to his calling, it was a calling to be a stonemason, but to God, hardcore. And we could spend a lot of time talking about Philippa, who was left behind to fight off Indians, to take care of the family, to do all the things that her husband left for her to do while he walked there. But that is another conversation. John Romoyle knew that God needed him in this temple, working on this temple, and he made it happen. Today, as I was searching, I found out that I had heard that he had a polygamous wife, but you never hear about some of them. So I looked it up, and he did. He married a woman, took her down to Alpine from Salt Lake, and they ended up having 2 children, but she was seriously, and he put her in her own house. She'd asked to be in her own house. But she was seriously lonely for her family who lived back in Salt Lake, and he was isolated in the wild and woolly days of Alpine before it became the super fancy place to live. She begged him to let her go home, and she did, and she divorced him and raised her kids with her aunt at her aunt's house. And I don't know if he helped her financially. I didn't get that far in. Every time I opened my Ancestry app, and there were just so many stories, it was like, I don't know, just dozens and dozens of stories, more than the last time I'd opened it up. So I'd get stuck in these rabbit holes, and I'm like, I gotta prepare. But then I'm like, these stories are so good. And I had no idea that there was a divorce in our perfect pioneer story. But I did know that John Romoyle got in a big fight, and I think his bishop lived next door, and there were some water right issues. And there was this major tussle over the water rights, and I'm probably not getting the story right, but he wouldn't back down. He was super stubborn, which I think lent well to his plight and walking back and forth. Okay, so next family is Jedediah Morgan Grant and his wife, Susan Noble Fairchild Grant. So Jedediah Morgan Grant was one of the captains of the first 500 that came over across the plains, the very first pioneers. Susan Noble lived with her uncle. I think her parents may have not been married, and so her uncle adopted her. Although one story that's quite old said, "Oh, of course the parents were married. Why would we think otherwise?" Well, because there's no record of it. So she was probably born illegitimately and then adopted, and ended up coming across the plain with one of the other families. But Jedediah's first wife got really sick with cholera, and so did his baby. And they both, and Susan, this 15-year-old, took care of them both as they were getting across the plains, and they both died. And she left one older daughter named Caroline, and Susan took care of her. She's 15, and she's taking care of her. So when they get to the valley, they marry a year later when she's 16. And she takes care of Caroline, who's in the middle, and then they have 2 children. So just for some background on Jedediah, he was the first mayor in Salt Lake. He was, like I said, captain of one of the first 500 companies. He was always on a mission. He was in the first presidency to Brigham Young with Heber C. Kimball. He was an absolute zealot. He with Brigham Young's if anyone's heard of the Reformation, where everyone had to be baptized again and really double down and commit. It happened in about the 1850s, 1856, 57. Jedediah Grant was called Brigham's hammer, or sledgehammer, because he brought down the law on everybody and tried to get everybody rebaptized. I mean, he was a real zealot. He worked himself to death. But when he married Susan, he was 33, and I think he died at 40. They were only married 7 years. And in that time, he married 5 other women. And the very last woman he married was named Rachel. And 7 days before he died, Rachel gave birth to his son, Heber J. Grant, who became a prophet in our church. So she ended up marrying his brother, George Grant, but due to his drinking, she divorced him. So 2 stories, 2 divorces, which is really interesting. I didn't know either one of them before this morning. She took care of herself and her family and countless others until she died in 1882. Her life was hard. I mean, she's a 16-year-old girl, and her husband marries 5 other women in the matter of 7 years. He's always gone. She's taking care of everything. So there's this cute like book that one of the ancestors, one of my great cousins or whatever, put together, and in it Susan Easton Black writes that these were happy years for her until the unexpected death of Jedediah after only 7 years of marriage. And I'm thinking, these were hard years. Even though they were in the valley, they had to set up their home. They had these children, these new wives that came into me, and then being on your own. But she does say somewhere in her history, "Oh, children," as she's telling the young children in her old age, "you do not know how happy we were, even in these severe days of hardest trials." I like the way she said it. No offense to Susan Easton Black, who's a great historian, but she went through a lot of trials, and I hesitate to ever think of those as happy years. Even though she was happy, I like that she admits that they were hard. So let's see if I can make this work. Oh yes, can you hear it? This song came into my head. Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to like abruptly go into the song, but I kept thinking of those words. So some must push and some must pull. So I looked up the song and I started reading it, and I read this line: "So merrily on our way we go." Is that what we've learned about the handcart pioneer migration? Merrily on our way we go, like skipping through the valleys, like so not the story. So during church today, I looked up John Daniel Thompson, who wrote it. I was like, was he a kid? Did he go on this pioneer? Was he in the migration? He actually came across on a wagon, and he wrote this song to encourage more people to migrate. So he wrote this little happy song about like how fun it was to come to the valley in a handcart, which I think is so fascinating. He went and came back, brought one of the 10 handcart groups that ended up coming over in the migration. He did come over with one of them. And it's really interesting because this is the story of our gospel, how connected we are. So John was also a polygamist, and in 1887 or something like that, he was on trial for openly admitting that he was a polygamist. And my great grandfather, who was John Roe Moyle's great grandson, was his attorney and got him off. And I don't know how he got him off, because he was admitting that he was a polygamist. I haven't delved deeply into that story. But I think it's so fascinating how we're all deeply connected in this gospel, and especially in those early days. So that's John Daniel Thompson, and merrily on our way we go, up through the mountains, and we know that the handcart stories are a little harder than that. So one of my favorite stories, and one of the stories that I think applies so much to our LGBTQ individuals, is the story of the handcart, the Martin and Willie handcart company that got going too late in the season. And I'm sure most of you know this story, but the word came to Brigham Young. He was in a meeting and he stopped the meeting and he said to them, he's like, we need to get this handcart group in. It was late September, it was almost October, the snow was coming and it was an early snow and they'd had warnings about it. So you can read this, it says, I'll tell you that your faith, religion, and profession of religion will never save one soul of you in the celestial kingdom of our God unless you carry out just such principles as I am now teaching you. Go and bring in these people now on the plains and attend strictly to those things which we call temporal or temporal duties. Otherwise, your faith will be in vain. I put this up on Lift and Love every couple of months because I think it's so important that people understand that we have people on the plane still who are out there and cold and hungry and they need to come in. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but this is an important principle. So as I was studying this today, I remembered that there was a grant that was on this, that one of the first people. So I looked it up and it was actually George Grant, who was married to Susan Grant, who she married after he left, after her husband died. It was his brother. And he led the pack to get everybody in, and he took the first group out to go rescue these pioneers. And let's see, I didn't print it here, but I'll tell you, he wrote, we know that the Martin handcart story was hard. So George Grant later described the scene to President Young in the letter. He said, you can imagine between 500 and 600 men, women, and children fainting by the wayside, children crying, their limbs stiffened by the cold, their feet bleeding. The sight is almost too much for the stoutest of us, but we go on, do all we can. I think that not over 1/3 of Martin's company is able to walk. So here this man who ends up with alcohol problems, oddly enough, had to go out and rescue this family. I think it's so interesting as I'm like judging him for like not being a good husband to this woman who was my great-great-grandmother. I realized this hardship that he's been through. Okay. So I'm back to our Mormon pioneers, and if we can add conviction in here. I was shocked when I was looking at these stories and the realness. 2 divorces. In fact, John Wilmoyle's wife divorced twice. I don't know if I said that. She divorced first husband and second husband. Their stories were full of truth and suffering, and amazing stories of perseverance, of conviction. And so the question is, how do we take these pioneer words and use them? How do we make these words work for our LGBTQ children, for us as individuals? And how do we teach the leaders these same principles? Because these words apply to the LGBTQ community as much as any words apply. So I'm going to tell you 2 more stories, and then I want to talk about, I want to come back to these words, and I want you to think about them in your own, like what you're thinking about those words. Okay, so in an Ensign article where the story of Brigham Young asking for people to go out on the plains and get the pioneers, there is a quote by Wallace Stegner that some of you may be familiar with. It's from his writings I think it's an article published in a magazine, Ordeal by Handcarts. But he asks this question, like, how are they doing this? How are they surviving? So this is 100 and a couple of years later that Stegner's looking back over this. but it says, perhaps their suffering seems less dramatic because the handcart pioneers bore it meekly, praising God instead of fighting for life with the ferocity of animals. Wrote historian Wallace Stegner of the handcart pioneers and their rescue. He says, but if courage and endurance make a story, if human kindness and helpfulness and brotherly love in the midst of raw horror are worth recording, this half-forgotten episode of Mormon migration is one of the great tales of the West and of America. We haven't forgotten it, but I think the world forgot it. I think the United States forgot our story. So I have these cute little pictures from the Pioneer Trek. I'm going to tell you one story before we go back to these and figure out how we can use them. So my husband and I were in charge of, this was like 2014, we were in charge of the activities for Pioneer Trek. And since we're in Trek season and everybody's like gathering their Trek clothes and coming back and speaking about it, I thought it would be appropriate to tell the story. So this is my youngest, he's right in the front in the green pants. And we had the, everyone said, oh, for activities, which was our calling with Trek, you can do like the Pioneer Olympics or do all these things. And I just couldn't do it. And then my nieces, a month before Pioneer Trek, my nieces came home off a Pioneer Trek and they had built a temple on the Trek. And it was amazing. And they told me they were just blown away, these kids. So I quickly called the man that had created this temple and said, hey, I'm in this little stake up in Salt Lake City. Is your temple still available? Can we use it for ours? And he's like, yeah, actually, why don't you come down? I'll show you how to put it all together. And then he said to my husband, as I think he looked at my husband like he was giving us all these instructions. And he's like, well, I'm just going to come. I'm going to come do it with you and help you build it. So these are pictures of the kids. The penny mat, they glued pennies on a mat. And then we made a doormat for the temple. And those pennies symbolized the women's efforts of bringing their pennies to finish off the Kirtland Temple. The kids, these are the kids building, like painting this foam. Okay, here's some of the kids and some of the leaders building. The guy in the green shirt on the right is the one that came for an entire day, who was not even in our stake and had already done it once. So here's part of the temple. You can see the scale of it. It's my cousin and I, we're both Moyals standing under the holiness to the Lord, and sort of, you know, the symbol of what my grandfather had done. But if you look up at those little pictures, that's all stained glass that was donated by I can't forget their couple's name, but they're down at Thanksgiving Point, and that's stained glass from other temples around the world. And the kids had glued those in. You can see all of the little suns were cut. If you look at the bottom, those are windows that they painted. But a lot of it was constructed by Daryl, who did it first, but all those walls are Muslim. So they're Muslim, and then the kids just painted them, which was kind of amazing. So you can see the scale of this thing. So as we were finishing, so the story, what they did is they had they built this temple, and then the kids would go to bed, and then these midnight riders would come in on horseback and burn the temple down. So that's what we were going to do. Except the stake young men's president got word of it and was really worried that the kids would be scared. So he, without talking to us or the other leaders, went to the stake president and had the whole thing had that part of our big production shut down. To say that I was mad is like such an understatement. I mean, I was spitting, screaming, like on fire, angry, because that was the big moment when these kids realized that all this work, these hours and hours of work. I mean, look at those windows. Those were all paper that they cut out. Like hours of work was burned by a mom. I was so furious. Like it took me days to get over it. So, and a lot of praying and some but just, I don't know why I was so angry, but I was just furious. I was tired. We'd spent all this time pulling all this equipment together. And anyway, we started putting the temple up, as you saw. We're getting really close. And right about this scene, before they'd finished painting all of it and whatnot, it started to rain. And a lot of the people were worried that we were kind of in this little basin, and they were worried that this huge storm was coming and it was going to flood us out. So as the kids were finishing this up, the stake president was going to shut it down. We weren't quite ready. And again, I'm just so furious. So we kept working on it. And and they had a little fireside, and we kept working on it, and the rain was coming, and it was kind of sprinkling, and the stake president had to leave, but he's like, we need to shut this down as soon as the fireside's over. So some certain kids were over there, and they were just finishing it up. It's dark outside. They take that penny mat, and you can see behind my cousin's legs, there's that wood there. They lay the penny mat down. And in that moment, the rain stopped. And I don't know if you can see this, but 2 rainbows shot through the sky. And it was like, and they stayed there for like hours. Every one of the kids and their groups, this is me and my family, we got our picture in front of the temple. The temple was 30 feet high, by the way. Moroni's his trumpet. Everybody got pictures in front of these rainbows. And I realized in that moment, and forgive me for being if this is blasphemous, but the Lord can take care of where leaders come up short, and that he had something better planned for us. And really, like, this picture I'm not even sure it does it justice, but in that moment, the Lord took care of me and my heart that was broken over these leaders that kept trying to shut down what we were trying to do. And this has always been a symbol to me of we persevere, we just keep going. And no, was this an experience like the pioneers? No, but it was really important to me, and it was super foundational. Right after this, my daughter went on her mission, and then 2 years later, I lost my brother, and this symbol has really sustained me through the last, several years that have been super hard with my son and with my brother. And do we know what it's like to be pioneers? I know. Yes, I believe we do. I don't know that any of us, there's probably a lot of us that could get over the mountains on a wagon. But what our LGBTQ individuals that are doing in the church and for God, and what their families are doing, is nothing short of a miracle. And I have 100% faith that the Lord is in this with us, that there is a double rainbow coming to us, and that at some point our families will be well supported in his church, that we will be taken care of, and that we will understand differently, and that those that don't understand now will understand differently. And this is not going to look like what I think. I think that's the lesson. The temple stood, it didn't get burned down. In fact, another ward used it not too long after, another stake, which was maybe even another blessing, that it got to be used again instead of burned down. But we have these pictures that are just like, I know that the Lord was there. And I know that I needed this grounding to get me through what I've been through. And that's what I want to talk about, is how do we find our own grounding, and where are those moments, and do we acknowledge them? Do we see them? The Lord throwing down a double rainbow right as the stake president is about to shut down something that whatever, however your story goes. So I'm going to come back to these words and just have a look at them for a second. At the end of this Ensign article, they ask, why did these pioneers bear the suffering meekly, praising God? The answer is found in their testimonies of the gospel of Jesus Christ, and in a common goal, to hear the prophet's voice and live with the saints in Zion. This is why there was courage and endurance, kindness and helpfulness, and brotherly love, as Wallace Stegner noted. While not all Latter-day Saints rose to the occasion, the fact that so many did stand as a witness to their commitment to the gospel of Jesus Christ. So I'm going to stop sharing, and you get to see my red cry face. But I want to talk about like how we can see these words in our life, how we can see God's hand in whatever way you are reaching out to God today as pioneers. And I think everyone has the opportunity. You can just unmute and speak, right? Valerie, is that how it's? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, people can just chime in.
Yeah, I've spoken enough, so I want to hear what you have to say and what you see and what you feel.
Hey everybody, I'm Scott. I courage is the number one word that sticks out to me. I love 17 Miracles. I love Ephraim's Rescue. So those two, I love to watch them and kind of remind myself of that. And yesterday we had Pioneer Day at our ward. There was a lot of things that you were saying that was kind of bringing a lot of things about like how we, especially with LGBTQ plus, how it's kind of it's the courage part is the biggest thing. You need to be in a good place for yourself to be able to open up and be able to share your story or be able to have that community that starts growing. And I'm just that's a place where each person, even though like I even see with my mom, and her courage is also growing with the experiences that she's learning too. And now that I'm where I'm at, where I'm open to share my story, and I've even tried to reach out to the stake and telling them like, hey, I would love for us to have an opportunity to kind of have conversations, even do a fireside, which they're brand new. So right now they're like, we're not ready for that, but we could do a service project. And I'm like, no, I want something else. You know, like I want a conversation, you know, right now, especially with how I'm in Florida. So
Oh,
it's
bless
kind
your
of a
heart.
special place. Like, yeah, it's a very special place. And I've already gone to Tallahassee, being courageous and talking even to the Senate, which was one of the craziest things I've ever done. But even doing that, like that's a form of courage, you know, trying to stand up for what's going on right here in Florida. And I know it's not just Florida, there's other places too. Um, but for us to be able to speak and to just to be a support and even to bring up these things even to our stake, I feel like that's a form of courage. And I know with one of the stake presidency, it is reeling in his head what I shared, and I told him like it's because I saw that Ben Shalati and Charlie Bird did a conference over in Canada, and I was like, I want to do the same thing here. You're like, I mean, if whatever we can do, but I know in time, you know, the Lord will help out with letting our voices be heard and having that understanding. Um, but yeah, sorry, I spoke too much.
No, Scott, I really love that because I think it does take immense courage, and some people don't have the courage to go to the stake and offer up those ideas. But if you have the courage, do it. If your courage is just being comfortable with who you are and showing up, knowing that you're valued as a child of God, regardless of anyone else's opinion around, that's also a hardcore like courage and conviction, right? That's the conviction we need. Thank you.
I'll just piggyback off of that comment. Working with Emmaus for the past couple of years, I have seen, like we hear from people all around the nation, and you know, we do expand outside of the US too, but most of our stories are in America. And there are a lot of people that have approached their stake about firesides or devotionals, and it's hit and miss. Some stakes are all in and they pull them off. And some of our past devotionals are talking about, how those firesides got pulled off in the stakes. So it happens. I was denied in Oregon in my stake there, and it's hit and miss, but just keep trying. I think each of us in our little pockets trying to bring awareness and make a difference, it helps.
I think so too. And one thing I wish we were better at Lift and Love is like expressing how, like, it's the people are out there. There's for sure loud voices that are speaking and against, especially in Florida. There are just loud voices, but the amount of people who are inching this forward, even that don't have a dog in the fight, that are allies who are saying, hey, we need to do better. Bishops who are standing up. And I know my bishop pulled me aside the other day and said, hey, I got your back, and I know we're going to have change, and that change will come here, and it's important. And like noticing where the rescues are, and if you can, and if you have a place, broadcasting those rescues, because that is what gives us the hope, right? That's the story of the pioneers that we lean into so heavily, is that there is rescue, and people are seeing differently. And groups like Deb's One Heart and Scott going to your stake president, there's work done by LGBTQ people, there's work done by allies and families, and if we can see the community and the conviction and the courage that's happening there, I hope that will give more strength to the group, to all of us, to the church. I mean, we all know that the church will be better when they understand, and when they have all of us, all of you, all LGBTQ members, all members there. And I talked for way too long about my pioneers. See, I got all wrapped up in it. So we probably need to wrap up. I just want to make sure that if you haven't signed up for Gather, that you do. For those of you who don't know, Gather will be September 15th and 16th. And on the 16th, we moved it to the 15th. So Friday afternoon, we break into 3 groups: LGBTQ specific, parent specific, family specific, which I'll take. And then the Emmaus group is running the allies and leaders group. And they're going to be full houses. I think currently the ally group will have 350 people. We have over 1,000 people signed up for Gather, and we're not even to the home stretch yet. So it's just going to be a really amazing time. And it's that notice how many people are there. And I'll tell you, I think 1/4 of them are ally and leaders, not family and not LGBTQ people. So notice the rescuers that are coming, that are there.
Thank you, Allison.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I'm
appreciate you
sorry I
so much.
went on so much
Well,
about
I was
this.
going to say, so we did have Eric and Julie had their hands raised. I was thinking we could have a closing prayer and end the recording, but then we could stay and have a few questions and comments. Would that be okay?
Yeah, that's great with me. Then my husband can finish making dinner.
Okay, because I want to keep talking, because I know we had some questions and comments, but we'll go ahead and close out the meeting and finish up the recording. I did want to announce that our next devotional is August 27th with Chelsea Cheney, and she's going to talk about LGBTQ fireside that she did in her stake. So that might be helpful for anyone that's trying to work with their stake on that. And one other quick announcement is we are having an Emmaus dinner on August 3rd along the Wasatch Front for anyone that's here. So if you have any questions and you want to come to that, go ahead and message Erica or me. And then we're going to have a closing prayer by Matt Kennedy.
Are we okay? All right. Our Father in heaven, we are so grateful to be gathered here this evening across so many different places to listen and to learn and to join our voices, either vocally or internally, together into the efforts of the pioneering spirit of lifting each other and finding our way forward. We ask thee to bless us all with thy spirit as we go our ways, that we will continue to seek after thee and find those who are struggling and find those who we can give aid to their voice, to lift them up and bring them together with us. We pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks all. For those of you who have to pop off, thanks so much.
Okay, Eric, we'd like to hear from you.